Let me give you a quick recap of my week out at the Mohegan Sun with Bellator. So there's so many things that go on, and there's some terms that you guys are going to hear. And until recently, I was part of the you guys that heard, by example, bubble. You're hearing this in all of sports, right? The NBA's got this bubble going on, and football's going to enter a bubble, and Fight Island in the bubble, and Bellator has a bubble. I guess I didn't fully know what that meant. I found it interesting, so I'll just share with you. But bubble largely just means a very specific place that is enclosed for only people who qualify to be within the bubble. Now, to qualify is not some kind of an arrogant statement. It means that you passed your COVID tests. It meant that you are quarantining. It meant that you're going to follow all of the policies that go along with participation in the bubble. How you're going to get linens for your room, how you're going to get food, all has to do with a bubble. From some of the obvious with the hands and the touching of the face to the mask wearing. But I just share with you, as I went through my first bubble, you're able to see a number of really interesting things. So everybody gets weighed in, and it kind of appears as business as usual if you're a fan that's following along online or you're a fan that's following along through the television. But there's a little bit more that goes into it. And one thing that happened with me being part of this bubble is you're doing a show in front of nobody. Now, of course, nobody isn't a literal statement. It takes a lot of people to do it. Largely, you're talking about the fans, but you'd be very impressed and possibly surprised how few people, when you're really going out of your way to cut down on numbers, you can do a show with. So, Cage is here. I'm in the furthest part of the arena. That's where Jay and I sit. And that isn't very far away. It's a very encompassed area, but there is nobody behind Jay and I. So point being, I can see everything. So what I'm really witnessing when the matches are going on and not going on is I'm witnessing this well-oiled machine known as the commission. And it's Mike Mazzulli and his team, right? It's one of the most respected commission, but I'm watching the whole thing. I mean, how the scores come in, what the doctors do. A referee knows exactly what matches he's assigned to, which means that he knows what matches he's not, which means he knows how to exit the building, wash the hands, change the mask. New guy comes in. Same goes with the judges. There's no communication or dialogue that needs to take place. It's already been done. They're all so well organized. I'm just watching this whole thing going, my goodness. So, what you wouldn't notice with all the crowd there, you just wouldn't notice with the chaos. So I'm watching all of these things happen. We come to a fight that is an undercard fight, but it moved twice. It's Chris Lencioni versus Aj Agazor. This was supposed to be scheduled as the third fight of the night. It did and got so much interest, and like any fight, whatever is the most interesting, that the people want to see the most becomes the main event. Whatever people want to see, the next is the co-main event, and so on down the card. And that's a little bit of a broad statement, but that's how these cards are done. And these two, AJ and Lencioni, got so much interest that they went from the third fight to the fourth fight to the fifth fight to ultimately the sixth fight, which is all compliments within our space. And the audience may not recognize it, but the competitors within the space do realize the later in the night you go, the bigger pat on the back you're being given. Well, this fight gets so interesting that it starts to move on the card. Okay, it's time to fight. This fight ended up being the dirtiest fight that I have seen since Colby Covington and George Masvidal. And a lot of it did have to do with the empty crowd. A lot of it was just trash talk. But these guys started before the very first bell went on. They continued after the final bell rang. And there's a number. Here would be a very good statement for you, okay? Very good and accurate and responsible statement for me to give to anybody is you do not mess with a referee, period. It does not matter what your standing is within the sport. If it is your first time and you're scared to death or you're the champion of the world, you are not in charge of that ring. Your goal is to take charge of your opponent, but at no point are you in charge of the ring. The referee is. Be very good for me to tell you don't ever mess with a referee, okay? Fair statement. There's never a time in life that I would have to tell you in any walk that you don't mess with Mike Beltran. That would be a statement of obviousness. Mike Beltran is a former Marine who plays a gangster on TV, quite literally. He's in a television show called Mayans MC. He's a rough-looking guy. He's a rough guy, but you're just not going to mess with Mike. Mike's a little frustrated at all of the antics that are taking place in this match. Some of them because they are bordering in the gray area of the rules, which are Mike's job to interpret, and some of them are just anti-sportsmanship. talking trash to your opponent, I don't know if there's anything technically written down in the rule book or not. I've never seen it. I don't know, but we all do know that's not within the sport, particularly in a quiet building, that everything's getting picked up. Much like any professional sport, you're well aware that children are watching and there's a role model factor, and I understand that that isn't the way the rule book is written, but you still have an obligation of some sort. So Mike does everything that you could possibly do, including stopping the match, bringing them together, and letting them know what's up. The match comes to conclusion, and I will tell you, I mean, this was just a fun match. It was a very, very hard match to judge. By example, where I'm sitting, I only have one human being that I can talk to for the duration of the program, which is Aj Agazor. And after the very first round, in the stand-up regard, Lencioni for sure won. The problem for Lencioni is there was 90 seconds in the stand-up, there was 3.5 minutes on the ground, of which AJ won. So do you look at this and go, okay, one guy won 2/3 of the round, obviously he won the round. You go, wait a second, this sport is based upon damage, and some of the damage that was done on the feet superseded the control factors that were done on the ground. Now, this isn't a question for you guys or me to answer. This is a question that we would ask, and then the judges have to answer. Take everything I just said to you and times that by 2, because that's the way the second round went. So I'm sitting with Glaze. I don't know who won. It's very confusing for the reasons I just said. So I turned to Jay after each round. I go, who won that round? Jay says AJ. First round. Second round gets done. Jay, who won that round? AJ. Get to the third round was pretty clear, and that was for Lencioni. Well, I don't know if Jay's right. I don't know what anyone's going to think. It was just a weird match, which, in all fairness, added to the fun. This was a fun 18 minutes of my life as a viewer. Everything I'm telling you about how dirty this got, or the referee having to get involved, it made it fun, okay? And I don't mean to make lightheartedness of somebody going out there and having a dirty contest or talking trash to each other, but I'm also a human being. I'm sharing with you for the 18 minutes of my life I gave to this fight. Man, I had a really good time. So the whole fight ends, and time to shake hands. Well, no, AJ's going to hit Splitsville. He's not shaking hands. He's nothing. Well, Mike Beltran's still in charge. Until you leave that cage, make no mistake who is in charge. Mike grabs him and brings him back. He says, yes, you are going to shake hands. So they touch hands. Scores come in, and it went to Lencioni. So you move forward on the card. Eventually, you run into Matt Mitrione, and he's going to take on Tim Johnson. Now, Matt Mitrione is one of these guys, and he has an expression that I've never heard anybody else use, so I want to credit to Mitrione, but it will tell you a lot of what you need to know about Matt. You've all heard the expression, win at all cost. Well, win at all cost is a big pound your chest and bravado, and maybe some dad loves to say that to his junior high kid because he's trying to make him a man. But what the hell does that mean, win at all cost? I've never known. Mitrione doesn't follow that theory. Mitrione believes you compete at all costs. Whatever I have to do to compete, wherever I have to fly, whatever rules the event has, but I really want to compete. And when you do look at Matt Mitrione, who succeeded at everything he's ever tried his entire life, he liked football at one point in his life. He ended up in the NFL. He was the direct backup to Michael Strahan by example. He decides he's going to try this MMA thing. He makes it to the highest levels. Ends up 4th in the heavyweight world Grand Prix. I mean, he makes it to the highest levels. His opponent's going to be Tim Johnson. Tim Johnson is coming off the biggest upset in MMA of 2020. One of the bigger upsets in the history of MMA. He took on a young prospect named Tyrell Fortune. I condescend to you to tell you about Tim Johnson versus Tyrell Fortune because unless you're a hardcore, perhaps you didn't know about this match, but Tyrell's won 11 national championships in college wrestling. I don't know, or in amateur wrestling. I don't know if that's the record, but I'm a huge fan, and I don't know anybody that's won more. It may have happened. I don't know of anybody who's won more national championships than Tyrell. He springs into MMA completely undefeated. Tim Johnson comes out, and he's had an up and down. You know, he's won some matches, lost some matches. Boom! Lands a shot, puts Tyrell down for the first time in Tyrell's career. And if we're having this conversation 10 years from now, it's quite possible that I could make that statement even then. Tyrell may never lose another match. That's how good he is. Tim puts him down. Tyrell doesn't get up. Tim wins the match. So Tim now draws into Matt Mitrione, who's a pain in the ass for anybody at any time. And right when the fight starts, they come together and they clack heads. Mitrione goes down, catches him right on the chin, completely unincidental. But what it has done now, it didn't as much change the outcome of the match in terms of it hurt Matt or it swelled his eye or cut him and caused some blood, some things like you will see with a head. But all this did was change the position that they're fighting in. Mitrione would love to keep it right here. Problem is, they're now here. By the way, I should mention, Tim Johnson is all of 265. He's one of these really big guys that has to pull a little bit of weight to make the limit. Imagine having somebody like that on top of you. Tim gets wrist control. He starts swinging away. He pounds out Mitrione. So now Tim Johnson has taken out the biggest prospect in the division of Tyrell, and now he's taken out one of the biggest names in the history of the division in Matt Mitrione. Pretty good spot. If you're Tim, where's he going to go from here? We're going to wait and see. Finally, you draw into Chandler versus Benson Henderson. And that's just going to be a hard night for anybody. Anybody that draws Benson or draws Chandler, man, you better pack a lunch. You're going to be out there a while. And Chandler, going into the fight, was openly predicting this is going to go the distance. As good as I am and as good as I believe I am and as good as you people will back me up on, I don't have what it takes to finish this guy. But the good news is neither does anybody else. And the better news is I'm ready for it, and I'm going to go 15 minutes harder than he does. It was one of these really interesting stories, and I happen to also observe their first contest, both of their careers, and come to the same conclusion as Chandler. You're going to be out there for a while. Gain favor with the judges, work the system as best you know how, and other than that, it's anything goes, right? Well, Chandler catches him early. These guys start throwing heat at each other. Benson Henderson is doing a perfect game plan to come out and disrupt the rhythm of Michael Chandler. Benson is throwing heat. There's always been a story on Benson Henderson, whether you agree with it or not. There is a narrative around his career that he is a slow starter. I've never seen Benson as a slow starter myself, but I will acknowledge that he comes on stronger late. While you hear what I just said and go, Chael, you just said the same thing in a different way. I'm well aware. But there's a difference in velocity and acceleration. Velocity is one pace that withholds, and acceleration gets better as the night goes on. I suggest for you that that's what Benson does. But Benson decides that he's going to come out hard and fast. I really agreed with that. Even in hindsight and it costing him the match, I would still argue Benson's mindset and strategy and his coaching and game plan was on point. But MMA is just not a situation of 2 + 2 = 4. It never has been. Any other walk of life, if I do this, I can expect this. MMA 2 + 2 just isn't 4. This was one of those situations, and Chandler came out after the fact and revealed to the audience that he's now no longer signed. That was his final contract of his agreement. And where he's going to go, and I didn't know that. I bring that to you because that's up in the air, and you can have all sorts of parity with Michael Chandler. We'll see where everything goes. All in all, I thought that it was a very fun and successful weekend. Now you guys maybe know a little bit more understanding of what the bubble is. And on to the next one.